Friends, we have arrived at another landmark in the year, another new season in which to experience pandemic. The school year is beginning. There's a chill now in the air, and it's the start of a new program year at the church. Today, as I said, is Covenanting Sunday, when we reaffirm our intention to journey together in faith. This year, we may need to be quite creative about finding the ways in which we can be together while we must be physically separate. Togetherness is something that many of us are longing for in this time. But our gospel lesson this morning reminds us that togetherness isn't always easy. Wherever there is a connection between people, whether it's in a family or in a friendship, in a faith community or in a town or in a nation, wherever there is connection between people, there is also conflict. That's part of the deal. And in this time of so many challenges, conflict may well be amplified for us. We may need even more help than usual figuring out how to be together with the people we're trying to be together with. But don't worry, Jesus has some advice for us for what to do when things get hard. Now, usually when Jesus teaches, he does not give advice or instruction. He actually usually teaches using questions or stories. So when Jesus actually gives us specific instructions, it's worth listening. Now, this advice may be familiar to you. You may have heard it many times. I think it's worth hearing again. I could listen to this every day and still not live up to it. So let's review the instructions that Jesus has for us. Here's what Jesus has to say. If someone has harmed you, talk to them directly and describe your perspective, what has happened one-on-one. Now notice what Jesus does not say here. Jesus does not say, pretend that it doesn't matter that you've been harmed, right? Especially significant harm, right? Don't silently resent the harm for years without saying anything about it. Don't complain about it privately to your friends, to other people. And don't call the person out in front of a crowd about what you've experienced. Talk to them directly in a conversation one-on-one. Now, many people since the time of Jesus has pointed out that there's an important caveat to this particular instruction, so I'll mention it here. In a case, depending on what kind of harm has been done or what kind of power difference there may be between the two people, it may be that it's not safe for the person who has been harmed to talk privately one-on-one with the person who has harmed them. So proceed with caution. Use your own discernment. Very often, this is a great first step. So first step, talk directly to any person who has harmed you one-on-one. Now, Jesus frames this as that we're the ones who've been harmed, right? And that's often how we think of it ourselves. But there's an important flip side to what he's just said, which is that we have a responsibility to listen when someone brings a concern to us. We should, in fact, expect that we will make mistakes and harm other people. It's human nature. It's the nature of trying to connect with one another that we will make mistakes and hurt other people. And when they come to us, we shouldn't be surprised or even too alarmed that we have made a mistake. God's forgiveness is vast. We should expect to make mistakes. And here's an even harder angle to that. We could try to receive the conversation as a gift, right? It's never fun to learn that we've made a mistake or that someone's been harmed by something that we've done. And yet their willingness to bring the issue to our attention, to express even anger or frustration, is a gift. It's a gift that offers possibility for healing in our relationship. So you can try to receive that conversation as a gift. And also remember that whether we're the person who's been harmed or we're the person who may have caused harm, that we need to listen, but that doesn't mean we always have to agree. Listening and agreeing are two different things, and it's important to honor another person's experience, whether or not it's the same as our own. So talk one-on-one with someone who's harmed you, or listen well one-on-one if someone tries to talk to you about something you have done. And what happens if that doesn't work? If nothing is really listened to, not necessarily everyone agrees, but what if you're not even listened to? Jesus suggests then widening the circle, right? You might need one friend to come with you, or two. You may need a whole community to be part of the conversation. And the whole community, the witnesses are there in order to seek the truth, in order to witness to the truth. Sometimes you're going after an objective truth. More often, you may just need to really hear the truth of the experience of each person in the conflict. Another role that other people bring, right, is protecting the vulnerable, and making sure anyone who needs protection in this dynamic can be protected. And then what happens if none of these things work, right? With a one-on-one conversation, the small group or the big group conversation, if none of those things can work, Jesus says, only under those circumstances does it make sense to actually find some way to separate yourself. What he says is, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector, which sounds pretty bad if you're familiar with how people generally felt about Gentiles or tax collectors. But keep in mind here also what Jesus did in relationship to Gentiles and tax collectors. These were outsiders in a sense, and yet they're also people for whom he tried to connect and offer compassion. And there's always sort of an open door to the possibility of future connectedness. So while we may need for our own safety or peace of mind sometimes to separate ourselves from others, if possible, to do so in a way that allows for future connection and progress. Sometimes people think of Jesus as a sweet and maybe overly idealistic guy, but this is deeply practical and also spiritually tough advice that Jesus offers us today. It's not a magic formula. It won't always work, but it is a nice map to try when things go awry in our relationships. So I invite you to consider now or later in the day whether any of these steps might help you in thinking about any of the conflicts that touch your life, whether they're conflicts of family, conflicts of friendship, conflicts in your wider circles, even conflicts in our nation. How could these approaches help us? And this short passage doesn't only contain tough spiritual instruction for us to wrestle with. It concludes with these lovely words, which may also be familiar. Where two or three are gathered in my name, I am there among them. So I've been wondering how we might experience God's presence with us, among us, as we gather this fall in God's name, as one body of the church, even while we are mostly connecting on screens. This strange time has made me think of another time when our gathering felt a little bit strange. Some of you were here in the summer of 2017 when our building was under construction. This is what worship looked like at that time. We have some lovely neighbors across the street at Concord Children's Center who were kind enough to let us use their common space for our summer worship. You can see some big bouncy balls on the far wall. There were some challenges for us to meet in this time. Right? We had to figure out how can we welcome people and make it comfortable? Where will people sit? Will they be able to see? We had to change all of our practices. How would we share communion and gather the offering? What would the music be like? And what could we do to make it feel like it was still our community, even if we weren't in the space that we were used to meeting in? So as we prepared to leave the building, we made prayer flags, celebrating what we felt was the best of who we were as a community, things that we wanted to be sure to remember and take with us no matter where we gathered. Here are a few more. And it occurred to me that these flags might be a good thing to have with us now. So I've hung some behind me. I don't know if you can see them very well. And I'll be including some images of these flags in our worship presentations during the fall. So as we continue to spend time mostly physically apart, it's important to remember who we are as a community and what remains important to us no matter how we're gathering. Things like our delight in music, however we can make it, however we can receive it. Things like our desire for the preservation and restoration of God's beautiful creation. Our call to connection, to serve and care for one another and for all of our neighbors. That's still true. The duty and joy of worshiping God together. Our commitment to inclusion, ever widening capacity for inclusion. Our intention to welcome and to love one another. Being together is a messy business, no matter how it happens. But being together also means we have other folks with which to claim important things about our beliefs and our identity. Other people to support and inspire us along the way. So we claim these things with gratitude for all the folks who have come before us, laying the foundations of our community. We claim these things with gratitude to all the folks who are connected to us now, sharing in this ministry alongside us. And we claim these things with gratitude to the God who calls us into community and comes to dwell among us wherever we gather and whenever we gather and however we gather. Thanks be to God.